Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world unlike anything you've probably imagined. Picture yourself walking through the vibrant streets of Tenochtitlan, the mighty capital of the Aztec Empire. The air is thick with the scent of fresh tortillas and the hum of merchants peddling their wares. But there's something else that catches your eye. The gardens. Oh, not just any gardens. These are meticulously designed, not only for beauty, but for function too. These gardens were the beating heart of the city, offering shade, food, and a deep connection to nature, all wrapped in one. The Aztecs, who were masters of agriculture and human ingenuity, had a fascinating way of transforming trees into living, breathing structures. Now here's the kicker. Imagine how you would have felt walking past these gardens. It wouldn't be the kind of stroll where you just admire the plants. No, these gardens were alive, shaped into fences, barriers, and even walls, standing strong as protectors of the empire. You might think, wow, this sounds like something from a futuristic science fiction movie. But nope, it's real history. And you probably won't survive this. Unless you're really into gardening and a bit of ancient engineering, of course. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're from and what time it is in your neck of the woods. It's always fun to see where you guys are tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through the city, dodging a merchant here, a dog there, and, yes, the smell of fresh flowers mixes with the more unusual sense of the market. The gardens surrounding you are so much more than what they seem. In the bustling heart of Tenochtitlan, with its canals and stone roads, these gardens were a testament to the Aztecs' incredible mastery over nature. But what's fascinating is that these weren't just any gardens. These gardens were designed with purpose. They were, in fact, an art form. The Aztecs had developed an intricate way of turning trees into living fences, walls, and dividers. Yes, you read that right, living fences. In their pursuit of agricultural perfection, Aztec gardeners crafted trees that would grow in specific ways, almost like sculptors shaping a piece of marble. But unlike marble, these trees grew, twisted, and lived. They trained trees to grow in such a way that they didn't just stand around looking pretty. Oh no, these trees had jobs. They formed natural barriers, protecting crops from floodwaters, enemies, and even the unpredictable whims of nature. This practice wasn't just functional, it was a way of blending the beauty of nature with the practicalities of survival. The Aztecs, of course, didn't just throw seeds into the ground and hope for the best. They were meticulous. Planters, yes, but also innovators. Gardens were sacred spaces, often designed around the layout of their cities. And within those gardens, trees were coaxed into growing in specific ways. Imagine being a gardener in Tenochtitlan, knowing that your work would help protect the community, the crops, and even the land itself. And yet, the knowledge of how to create such living fences wasn't universally known. These were secrets passed down through generations, an ancient craft lost to time. Historians still argue whether these living fences were primarily used for defense or if they had other symbolic meanings. Some say they were purely functional, providing natural fortifications and barriers. Others believe that the gardeners, in their deep connection to nature, saw these fences as living symbols of the relationship between the human world and the divine. Either way, the Aztecs' ability to shape their environment remains a testament to their deep understanding of the natural world. As you walk deeper into the heart of the Aztec city, it becomes clear that the role of gardeners in this vibrant society was far more than just a labor of love. Picture the gardeners, dressed in simple cloth, but with the weight of centuries of tradition behind them, carefully tending to their crops, trees, and living fences. Their work wasn't only about planting and harvesting. It was an art form, a science, and dare I say, a way of life. They were the unsung heroes of Tenochtitlan, shaping the landscape not just for beauty, but for survival. You see, the gardeners of the Aztec Empire held an essential place in society. While warriors defended the empire with swords and shields, gardeners fought a different kind of battle, one with nature itself. Their weapons? Tools passed down through generations, and most importantly, the ancient knowledge of how to manipulate the environment. This wasn't just about farming in the traditional sense. No, the Aztecs saw gardens as more than places for food. They were sacred, spiritual spaces that were directly tied to the gods. In fact, some historians believe that the role of the gardener in Aztec society was almost priestly, filled with respect and reverence for the land. Now, imagine walking in the footsteps of these gardeners as they move through the labyrinthine alleys of the city, each carrying a bundle of saplings or tending to the living fences. There was a certain precision to their movements, as though each tree, each vine, and each leaf held deeper meaning. The trees they worked with were not just tools for survival, they were also a reflection of the divine order. Some historians argue that the deep connection to nature wasn't just practical, but also mystical, a link between the physical and spiritual worlds. Interestingly, these gardeners were also responsible for maintaining the royal gardens, which were often some of the most spectacular and sacred spaces in the empire. These gardens weren't just for beauty, they were sacred offerings to the gods. The Aztecs, like many other ancient civilizations, believed that nature was an extension of the divine, and so their gardeners weren't just caretakers, they were stewards of the earth, responsible for ensuring that the gods were pleased. Historians still debate how much influence the divine had in the day-to-day work of these gardeners, but it's clear that they played an integral role in both the practical and spiritual aspects of Aztec life. And then there's the really quirky part. Some Aztec gardeners were known to have employed very unusual methods to enhance the growth of their trees and crops. For example, they were known to use animal dung, including the dung of crocodiles, to fertilize the soil. Yes, crocodile dung. It's a bit hard to imagine now, but the Aztecs were keen on using every resource available to ensure their gardens thrived. Historians still wonder how they discovered the benefits of such an unusual fertilizer. Did they just stumble upon it by accident? Or was it a carefully tested method passed down through generations? As you wander further, the gardens seem to take on a life of their own, almost as if the very earth beneath your feet is alive and breathing with you. The Aztecs didn't just plant trees for the sake of it. They trained them, sculpted them, and shaped them into living structures. Picture this. Rows upon rows of trees, each one carefully coaxed to grow in specific directions, forming living barriers, fences, and even walls. These were no ordinary gardens. The trees were treated like apprentices in a meticulous craft, each one growing to serve a very particular purpose. In Tenochtitlan, space was limited, and the city was often flooded due to its location on an island in the middle of Lake Texcoco. As a result, Aztec gardeners had to think outside the box, literally. The way they trained trees into living fences was one of the most ingenious techniques they developed. It wasn't just about planting a tree and hoping it grew well. These gardeners carefully manipulated the growth of the trees over time, guiding their trunks to twist, bend, and interlace with one another, creating natural walls that could withstand the pressures of the environment. It was a delicate balance between nature and human ingenuity. But how did they do this? Imagine a gardener, armed with nothing more than their knowledge, patience, and perhaps a few simple tools. They would begin by planting young saplings in specific places and then gently bending the trunks of the trees as they grew, securing them with ropes or weaving them into each other. Over time, these trees would fuse together, their branches and trunks interlocking to form a solid living barrier. The gardeners were skilled in the art of tree shaping, using methods that would seem almost magical by today's standards. Historians still argue over the exact techniques they used. Some believe the gardeners employed a kind of grafting, where they would attach branches from different trees to one another. Others suggest they simply trained the trees through careful bending and manipulation, a process that required immense patience and knowledge. While we may never know the full extent of how these living fences were made, what is clear is that they were highly effective. The Aztecs lived in an environment that could be as unforgiving as it was beautiful, with seasonal floods, wild animals, and even enemy invasions to contend with. Their living fences provided not just protection, but a way to thrive in a harsh and unpredictable world. And as the city's population grew, These living structures became more integral to the everyday life of the people. The living fences weren't just for the royal gardens or the temples. They were everywhere, from the canals that crisscross the city to the homes of common people. And here's the fascinating part. The trees that were used to create these living structures weren't just selected for their ability to grow tall or fast. They had to be trees that could thrive in the wet, sometimes marshy environment of Tenochtitlan. Some historians believe that the Aztecs primarily used species of willows and other trees with flexible branches that could be easily manipulated. But of course, the Aztecs didn't just go for practicality. They were also keen on beauty. Many of these living fences featured flowers and vines that were carefully woven into the branches, creating living, flowering barriers that added an aesthetic touch to the otherwise functional structures. As the sun dips low over Tenochtitlan, you can almost feel the city's pulse quickening with the changing light. The gardens, the living fences, and the trees themselves seem to take on a different energy as the day wears on. The shifting light reveals the true genius of the Aztec gardeners. These living fences weren't just functional, they were a dynamic part of the city's rhythm, changing with the seasons and adapting to the environment. It's almost as if the entire city, with its canals, temples, and living barriers, was one giant organism, working together in harmony. The fascinating part of this system was that the living fences weren't static. They grew and changed, responding to the shifting seasons and environmental conditions. This flexibility was a key element of their success. The Aztecs were masterful at adapting to their environment, and the living fences were a prime example of that. These structures could shift and grow as needed, accommodating the changing needs of the community. For example, during the rainy season, the fences would expand as the trees absorbed the excess water, naturally reinforcing their structures. In times of drought, the trees would conserve water, yet remain strong enough to protect the city. But of course, these living fences weren't just passive. They required constant care. The gardeners had to regularly maintain the trees, ensuring that they continued to grow in the desired direction. This wasn't just about planting the trees and hoping for the best. No, the gardeners were meticulous in their work, shaping and guiding the trees as they grew. They would use ropes, stakes, and sometimes even physical pressure to direct the tree's growth. It was a delicate balance, requiring a deep understanding of both the trees and the land. Historians are still puzzled by the level of sophistication involved in the care and training of these living fences. Some believe that the Aztecs may have even developed specific rituals or ceremonies to ensure the health of their gardens and trees. It's not hard to imagine a group of gardeners, perhaps led by a priest or spiritual leader, performing a kind of sacred ritual before tending to the trees. This blend of agriculture and spirituality is one of the defining features of Aztec culture, and it likely played a significant role in their approach to gardening. One of the more surprising elements of the living fences is how they were used to create private spaces in the otherwise crowded city. In a place like Tenochtitlan, where space was at a premium, privacy was a luxury. The living fences provided a way for people to carve out little sanctuaries within the larger urban environment. Imagine walking down a narrow street and suddenly stepping into a small, quiet space, separated from the bustle of the city by a thick, leafy barrier. It wasn't just about protection from the outside world. It was about creating personal, peaceful spaces where people could escape from the noise and chaos of city life. Of course, these living fences didn't just serve practical purposes. They were also a form of status. The wealthier families in Tenochtitlan could afford to have more elaborate living fences, often incorporating exotic plants, flowers, and even fruits. These fences weren't just functional barriers. They were statements of wealth and power, visible markers of one's place in Aztec society. The higher the walls, the more impressive the garden, the more significant the family. It's interesting to think about how these living fences could tell a story, just by looking at the size, complexity, and plant species used. Now, as you continue to stroll through Tenochtitlan's streets, you notice how these living fences not only demarcate private spaces, but also create a boundary between the urban and the sacred. Yes, the lines between the everyday and the divine were incredibly blurred in Aztec culture. The gardens, trees, and living fences weren't merely utilitarian, they were imbued with spiritual meaning. The Aztecs had a profound connection to their environment, and their interaction with nature was seen as a direct link to the gods. It's almost as if every plant, every vine, was a physical manifestation of the divine, growing right before your eyes. Consider for a moment the ceremonial aspect of these gardens. Aztec priests and spiritual leaders were often seen walking through these living fences, guiding the people through rites that would ensure the success of crops, the health of the trees, and the favor of the gods. These rituals weren't just about praying for good harvests or rain. They were about maintaining balance in the world. Every garden, every tree, was an offering to the gods. Historians argue that the importance of these living structures went far beyond the practical. They were a way of communicating with the divine. What's fascinating is that some of the more elaborate gardens were actually designed specifically for these kinds of ceremonies. Picture a sacred grove, a small oasis in the middle of the city, where the trees have been trained to grow into a canopy of intertwined branches, providing a shelter for spiritual rites. The air is thick with incense, and the soft rustling of leaves adds a calming backdrop to the chanting voices of the priests. These spaces weren't just for the elite, they were for the entire community. They were places where people could come together, offering their prayers and thanks to the gods who governed everything from the harvest to the weather. Historians are still debating the exact purpose and structure of these ceremonial gardens. Some believe that the trees were seen as a physical bridge between the world of humans and the realm of the gods, while others suggest that they were simply practical spaces for rituals, no different from any other garden in the city. What we do know is that these living fences were a key part of Aztec spiritual life, often central to the most important ceremonies of the year, including those associated with agricultural cycles. Beyond their spiritual significance, living fences also had a practical role in city defense. Tenochtitlan, surrounded by water, was naturally a target for invaders. The Aztecs had to find a way to protect their city from the threat of enemy attacks. The living fences, with their interwoven branches and solid trunks, became a key part of the city's defense strategy. The trees themselves acted as natural barriers, slowing down potential invaders and protecting key areas of the city. While the Aztecs were known for their impressive warriors and military strategies, these living structures played a surprisingly important role in fortifying the city against external threats. Even more interesting is that these fences were also a way of controlling the environment. With the constant flooding that occurred due to Tenochtitlan's location on an island, the Aztecs had to manage their landscape carefully. The living fences helped to redirect water and prevent erosion. They created barriers that could channel water away from key areas, helping to maintain the balance between the land and water. The fact that these fences had both defensive and environmental functions speaks to the incredible ingenuity of the Aztec gardeners. Their work went far beyond simple beautification. It was about creating a harmonious relationship between the city and nature. So the next time you think about a garden or even just a fence, imagine how much more it could mean if it were alive. These living fences, crafted with such care and intention, were more than just structures. They were representations of Aztec identity, spirituality, and survival. They were a testament to the skill, wisdom, and creativity of the people who built them. As we begin to wind down the journey through Tenochtitlan, you might wonder how these living fences, and the gardens they surrounded, lasted through the years. After all, we're talking about a society whose rise and fall is wrapped up in a relatively short period of time. The city, though incredible, didn't last forever, and the Spanish conquest in the early 16th century left little of the original splendor. Yet, the legacy of these living fences endures in surprising ways. While most of Tenochtitlan was destroyed or heavily altered by the Spanish, certain aspects of Aztec horticultural ingenuity continued to influence farming practices and urban design in the years that followed. For example, the concept of integrating nature directly into urban life, where gardens, trees, and even water management were seen as essential elements of daily living, would go on to inspire gardens and public spaces in later Mexican and Central American cities. The idea of using living structures for both practical and spiritual purposes spread, with various indigenous groups continuing to cultivate the art of gardening and tree training for generations. But beyond the more immediate historical continuity, there's a surprising thread that links these ancient practices to the modern world: sustainable design. In a time when environmental awareness is more important than ever, the Aztecs offer an early blueprint for how cities and nature can coexist. Their ability to turn trees into fences, canals into highways, and gardens into both shelters and sanctuaries serves as a reminder that when we work with nature, rather than against it, we're able to create something truly harmonious. Of course, historians still debate the extent to which the living fences were truly sustainable in the long run. Some argue that they may have been ultimately impractical on a large scale, while others believe they could have been perfected over time with further advancements in gardening techniques. Whatever the case, the fact remains that the Aztecs were pioneers in creating living, breathing structures that served both a utilitarian and spiritual function. In their city, the line between nature and civilization was never very clear, and that blurred boundary is one of the most fascinating aspects of their legacy. As the sun sets over your journey through the streets of Tenochtitlan, you can almost feel the weight of history. The living fences, once vibrant and full of purpose, now lie quiet in the past, but their influence lingers. You can imagine the gardeners tending to their creations, shaping the trees with care, weaving the living barriers just as their ancestors did. And in the stillness of the night, you can almost hear the rustle of the leaves like a soft whisper from the past, telling you that this world of trees, gardens, and ancient ingenuity is never truly gone. As we end tonight's journey, the hum of history fades away, and the stillness of the evening takes over. The image of the living fences slowly softens as the night grows deeper, and the thoughts of Tenochtitlan, with its canals, its vibrant gardens, and its carefully tended trees, begin to blend into the quiet world of sleep. You feel your body sink deeper into relaxation, just as the city of the Aztecs once settled into the natural rhythm of the land. In the peace of the night, take a moment to reflect on the wonder of it all, the way a living fence could hold so much meaning, the way people worked with nature, and the way even something as simple as a tree could become a symbol of strength, protection, and balance. Let that calm energy wrap around you, as the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze fades into silence. Now let your thoughts drift, just like the leaves of the trees. With every breath, you sink deeper into relaxation, letting go of the day's thoughts, allowing the gentle rhythm of history to carry you into rest. The trees, the gardens, the fences, they all remain, quietly waiting for you to return in your dreams, where nature and civilization are as one. Good night, sweet dreams.